Everyday injustice. Too many wrongful convictions. Corruption has infected the criminal justice system, leaving too many people helpless, fighting for their lives. Instead of receiving justice, people suffer. Is that why they say justice is blind?
Today on Everyday Injustice, we have New York from Ear Hustle. Welcome.
How you doing?
So you grew up in Brownsville. What was that like?
Depends what year. It started off pretty cool. I remember being a little kid, opening up my neighbor's door. They would leave the doors unlocked. I would go into Rosie's house. I would go into Miss Ernestine's house. Just a little kid playing around. In the back of our building, there was this cement hill. I call it cement hill because the east building is on low ground, and the west building is like at the top of a hill. And in between us, there's these cement pathways, right? And so it's like just a big playland, man. You ride your bike, your skateboard, your skates down these hills, and you're in glee. There were fights here and there, but that's just like normal, like normal. You never felt like you were gonna die, anything, fights here and there. But for the most part, it was fun back there. Never felt like I was gonna get kidnapped. Never felt like anything. Never saw police. It was just our own little world behind the buildings. So at that era, it was pretty cool. Then crack cocaine hit, and that was a shift. Uh, Fights turned into the potential to be killed over little or nothing. Uh, Poverty reigned free. Had a lot of kids with mothers who were on drugs, and so the kids would act out behind that, and also just be in sad situations like trying to hustle up enough money to get a 25-cent bag of potato chips and a 25-cent quarter water, we called it, for dinner. And so it's just a different experience.
So how did you end up going from New York to San Quentin?
Kept getting in trouble in New York, and jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, not knowing that the laws in California were 10 times more draconian than the ones in New York. And so went to the wrong state, man, and unfortunately in the wrong mind state.
So at what point do things start turning around for you?
The desire to turn around was always there. I just didn't have a path. So, there's a point where you get tired of violence because it's supposed to be a solution. It's supposed to be you're going to be respected and be left alone and not have to use violence because everybody knows better, right? But that day never really happens. It's always something. And so you just get tired of it, get tired of like going to jail and like hoping you win trial and all that crap. And tired of being taken away from your son's life and your son seeing you taken away. And so I was tired before the harm I caused in California happened. But even when I got in there and got smacked with the life sentence, it was hard. It was hard. But I started to develop faith because I realized that all my life the odds have been against me. They say about only they say only about 3 out of 10 people make it out of Brownsville without a rap sheet or a bullet scar. And so the odds are very low, 30% chance, right? But I never did everything I can to be one of the 30% or everything I can to make it 4 out of 10. Instead, I embrace hopelessness and bought into like, I'm going out blasting, so to speak, or, get rich or die trying, those kind of philosophies. When I got to Calipatra, which is a level maximum security prison in California, near Mexico, pretty much, I decided that I wanted to figure out what was wrong with me, first of all, and like, what was wrong with life? Why did I grow up in such a crazy place? Like, why did I have to make such bad choices in the face of bad choices? Like, the right answer to Brownsville probably would have been being a victim. And that doesn't feel like a good choice either, but my choice escalated the beefs to like somebody wanted to belittle you to somebody wants to kill you. And so I recognized my role in that, escalating it. But still, nobody wants to carry enough lunch money for everybody to be left alone. I mean, that's not a good choice, right? Nobody wants to be over policed. Nobody wants to be denied access to education. Nobody wants to be redlined, There's just not a lot of good choices there. So anyway, in prison, I don't know what snapped. I think one incident I remember that I give credit to is my Muslim brother named Samir. Samir saw me really, really angry because I felt like my conviction was unjust. I felt like they found both of their guns at the scene. And if it wasn't self-defense, it's at least manslaughter, not murder. And like I felt over convicted. I felt just worked by the system and punished for defending myself and defending a friend. And so Samir saw how angry I was, and he said, "Yo, brother, there's nobody that you can beat up that's going to get you out of prison. In fact, it's going to make it worse." And he didn't know me. He just saw me, walked up to me, said that, and walked away. And it just blew my mind. Like, what the hell? Like, who's this guy, man? What's a crazy dude? Like, what's up, man? And then how did he know how angry I was, or how I was feeling? And it just stayed in my head. I started thinking about Muhammad Ali and how Muhammad Ali would pick on people to get them mad on purpose. Because when you're mad, you're not thinking. And when you're mad, life can pick you apart. And that's what Muhammad Ali does. He gets you mad, you think you're doing something, you're going hard at life, and then he's just sitting there letting you get tired, knowing that you're not thinking clearly, and he picks you apart. And I was doing that over and over and over again. And so it struck me, and I said, you know what? I'm also always giving into the odds, like, get rich or die trying, going out blasting. This time I'm gonna do something different because I'm never going home. I messed this life up, but if there's an afterlife, let me get it right for the next life. And so I decided to try to do better. And I started going to all the religious service, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, because that's the only rehabilitation you had on a level 4 prison. That and AA, and I didn't use drugs or drink. So it was Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad for me. And it ended up being Muhammad in the end. And so I just decided that I was going to try to be better. And so that decision helped me a lot because I started looking for positive things to do in prison. So instead of trying to sell drugs from prison, I'm trying to like write books from prison, right? And that writing was therapeutic, and that writing led me on a journey that got me to San Quentin 10 years later. And at San Quentin, I finally got help for the writing, a college program, therapy, restorative justice, because I'm writing about stuff like trying to give an understanding of why gun violence happens. And I didn't even really know. It took me to be 40 and be in a restorative justice group and being in a guiding rage and a power group to realize that I was trying to overcome the trauma from running when my little brother got shot by trying to make up for that and pay it forward in every violent confrontation I've ever since. You know what I mean? And so that's when the opportunity came for me to be better. But I'll be honest with you, man. Wherever I was always me. If I had these opportunities at 5, no one ever got killed, and I would have never went to prison. It's just a matter of me finally getting opportunities to be better.
When you went in and you got that 55 to life sentence, were you thinking that you were never getting out?
At first, I thought I would be right back on a pill because I'm like, yo, they found their guns, bro. Like, they lied. They said I shot this man back to front. But the medical record says front to back. And I'm sure if we get a coroner to look at that other boy, you're going to see the injury started front to back, too. And so I felt really confident. But then I got a real bar in the system, and I realized that without $1 million, they're not letting me out no matter what the evidence says. And at that point, I just had to fight for myself, and I fought for years and years and years. Got back in court once just to get jerked by the same judge, in a way that was just a denial of law. And it just let me show that power can supersede law. If you're a minority and you don't have the people behind you to make the law follow itself. And so about 2011, that's when I really realized all my appeals were final. Once it's final, you can't even file anything. Your time barred, it's over with unless you get new evidence or a miracle happens. And so at that point, I felt like I was never going home. So from 2011 on, I was in a mindset, what can I do to be better from prison and make the world better from prison? Because I'm never getting out.
So how did Ear Hustle come around?
Luck. It started with nothing to do with me. It started with Earlonne and Nigel, and well, maybe a little bit. Maybe I'm gonna give you a backstory nobody talks about. So we had the media center was divided into different sections: the newspaper, the radio side, and the TV side. And then a new dimension came with Forward First Watch, which was a video program. So they had 2 video programs, a newspaper and a podcast. And so in the midst of all that, we started trying to see how we can work together. It felt like we were competing, and there should be no competition when you have the same mission, which is to improve the lives of incarcerated people and achieve public safety by showing people better paths to dealing with criminal justice, right? And so we started working together on these live shows. And me and Nigel hosted the first one together. And then and coming up with these live shows that we did, we ended up doing like 3 of them, shifting different hosts. We thought about like, what does it mean to work together as colleagues and knock down the separation, this volunteer prisoner stuff, right? Like, what does it mean to just be seen as colleagues? And then Earlonne and Nigel started working on an audio show that was a breaking away from KLW, where they got their audio training from. They wanted to just tell stories that didn't necessarily have a journalistic feel to it, just with stories that didn't necessarily advocate for anything. That were just telling good stories about life inside that people would find interesting and not think that happens in there, you know? And they asked everybody to be a part of it. They asked me, they went around saying, we're trying to start this thing, who wants to be down? I was like, yo, I'm too busy. And I think Antoine Williams was the only one to say yes. And so this thing launched and it did its thing and it became one of the biggest things, right? It just killed it. And then around season 3, we found out Earlonne was going to be going home. And so they started looking for a new co-host to take over inside for Earlonne. And I was recommended to be, 3 people said you should interview for it. I said, okay, I'll try it. I had a little bit of experience being on A Life of the Law and a little bit of experience producing shows for Justice Radio Show, Berkeley radio program. And so I tried out for it and I got it. I got the job after rigorous 3-part interview sessions and a lot of grilling from Earlonne. And then I started helping him out with Catch a Kite season 3. And then season 4, I took the mic as co-host. And it was amazing. And thank God. And I was really concerned. Like, Earlonne has such big shoes to follow. He does such an amazing job. And the chemistry him and Nigel have is magic. And how do you get involved in that? How do you, I was wondering if I was going to be a dud and the ratings would go down. But thank God I was able to add something, I guess, or at least not mess anything up. And the season we were nominated for, the season we were Pulitzer Prize finalists was season 4, my first season as co-host. So I'm really proud of that.
For those who have never heard Ear Hustle, what was it about? What were you guys doing on there?
Yeah, we just wanted to show people that we're human beings in there. You know what I mean? That's it. And it's crazy, interesting story about that. When I started with Ear Hustle, I came with a background of have written for San Quentin News and being on these other podcasts like Life of the Law. And they're really advocacy focused, right? And so I came to Ear Hustle with an advocacy heart. Like, let's do stories about this. Let's expose this. Let's show that. And I'm like, nah, we don't do none of that, right? We just tell great stories. And I'm like, what? We need to change this. Nah, we just tell great stories. And once I started working with them and seeing the magic, I realized just telling somebody's story works way better than advocacy. Because it's hard to really sell somebody something. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear your facts and figures. They just want to hear a story. And then when they hear a story, they make their own mind up, come to their own conclusions. And that's the best way for people to decide what's best for them, And so for people that never heard it, it's just about life inside, like birthday parties inside. Like, what does it mean to be gay for the stay? What does it mean to be married but not have access to a family visiting room where you could be alone with your wife? What does it mean to find out that you've been in this gang and you dedicate your life to this gang, but it costs you your family? It's not even worth it, right? So we just tell different stories. We're all over the place. This season we've been experimenting with poetry, telling stories through poetry. We don't stick to a real format. We're all over the place. They said if you don't grow, you die. But the one thing we stick to is, what is it like for system impacted people?
And how does this also help you find kind of your voice as you're trying to figure things out?
Well, I never looked at it as finding my voice. I felt like else was more about being a host and being a producer is elevating other people's voices by connecting them to platforms so they can be heard. But in general, like, most prisons don't have access to anything like that where we could show our humanity. And so it also is an opportunity for all of us to be uplifted, through that media center in San Quentin. And so that's how I look at it. It has helped me, though, I believe, as a journalist. I was a freelance writer while I worked for Ear Hustle. And I got published 42 times in 31 months. And I know some of it's just because I'm an amazing writer, but also some of it's because the popularity of Ear Hustle. You know that when I'm on there, you might get ratings from that, right? A little boost when Ear Hustle tweets out the story or whatever. So I feel like it helped give more visibility to my stories.
Why is it so important for incarcerated people to be able to do these kinds of things?
A lot of reasons, man. One, it led to a career for me. My life different. I'm out here paying taxes. I'm able to help with my grandchildren, put money away from them, break the curse of intergenerational incarceration and poverty. It led to a real life career. But two other more important things, or just as important things, is one, well, you need to hear the other side of the story. We have a criminal system that punishes the symptom and not the root causes of crime. And if you don't hear my side of the story, like there's times I've done crazy things. Like the time you might have seen me at 18 years old, walking past you with a gun in my hand and a mask on and shooting somebody on the corner. And you'd be like, what? That dude's a murderer. Put him away forever. But then you find out that guy shot my brother, that the police never did anything about it, that he shot more people in my neighborhood. And he wasn't on the run. He was standing on the corner every day for 6 months. And one day he waved the same gun at me, shot my little brother with it. And I got tired of it. And I ran and bought a gun and retaliated. And I did stuff like that because I felt like ashamed when I ran when my little brother got shot. So that doesn't excuse my behavior, but if you understand it from that lens, you look at it totally different. And when we think about what to do about it, right? Um, Maybe put more resources in the neighborhoods so people in the same neighborhood aren't robbing each other, have therapy available for people, but also like have access to jobs and careers and all kinds of things. So there's things we can do to stop crime that we don't. We just punish the symptom. And so if you never hear our side, you think of us as inhumane, you think of us as animals, and you hold the people with the least power the most accountable, not looking at how governments make decisions that give us little choices. And then the third thing I would say is that there's an old expression, if you leave me no voice, you leave me no choice. And I always go back to the 602 system, which is a way to file a grievance while you're in prison. Before the 602 system, where you could file a grievance, where just, and mind you, most of the time your grievances get denied. So you basically file a CO does something that you think is unfair, you file a grievance, you know, maybe they took your property unjustly or whatever. And 90% of the time, I would say, I'm guesstimating, don't quote me on that statistic, but most of the time you get denied. You know what I mean? You know, you get no justice. Or they grant it, but they grant it in a way where they're comedians, right? Like we argued before, like we wanted 4 pieces, we wanted more jelly. We got enough. We would get this peanut butter and jelly lunch. And the peanut butter and jelly lunch would have enough peanut butter and 4 slices of bread so you can have 2 sandwiches, but only enough jelly for one. And so we wanted 2 jellies. And so there's a movement to try to get 2 jellies. And so we can have 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches instead of one and a peanut butter sandwich. And instead they took away 2 pieces of bread. So sometimes you win and it backfires, right? But just the process of being heard has reduced the violence between COs and incarcerated people. Because when there was no grievance system, when nobody would hear us and let us speak, guys would attack, or COs would actually take one-on-one fights with people to settle issues. They would take their badges off. And that's how grievances were settled back then. But just communication. And the other thing I'll say, the fourth thing, we think that punishment is like the way to stop people's crime. What changed my heart and mind was a conversation. Like tough on crime, I don't know if it's okay to curse, but I'm just gonna say it. Nobody give a fuck about your tough on crime. The streets got the death penalty and it's instant. It doesn't take years to die. And we still out there because we're trying to get our needs met, and our needs of acceptance, belonging, food, all that stuff. When you don't get your needs met and you can't figure out how to do it in the right way, it's going to come out some kind of other way, right? Especially if you're not grounded in culture, if you're not grounded in a certain level of religion, or grounded in something that can keep you on the right path, no matter how hard the circumstances are, right? If you're not grounded in that, if you're grounded in broken homes, if you're grounded in a broken neighborhood, if you're grounded in a broken system, you're going to come out broken. And so it's just very important to understand that a conversation is what stops crime. And for me, it was a conversation with a mother who lost 2 sons to gun violence. Her name was Ayula. She came and told us her story, and it just broke my heart. And it made me realize I did that to somebody else's mother. I did that to my mother, and I'll never do that to another Black mother.
So, you know, it's interesting because I talked to lots of formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated. None of them, you know, believe that prison works. And yet, you know, in a way it did work for you, right? Because it helped you get to the point where you could get out and be productive. So
No, not at all. Prison was designed to make me worse. So wherever I was me, right? And so don't get me wrong, it's confusing, and it confuses most people because San Quentin did provide the space for me to get better. And what I mean by that, they allowed us to create groups that we can heal ourselves from. They allowed us to work with volunteers that donate equipment that we can do media center stuff. Most of that stuff they don't even pay for. You know what I mean? They just provided the space. But what I mean by that, that's luck. Like, you know how close I was to never getting to San Quentin and never getting out? It was luck. I came to San Quentin from the hole, from other prisons that don't have opportunity. So in order to get to San Quentin, it took me 13 years altogether. And so there was no therapy along that whole 13 years. No education, nothing. There was nothing for me that whole 13 years. I wanted to be better. And I found my way to San Quentin, right? And it's like I said, it's luck. I didn't even know all that stuff was happening at San Quentin. I just wanted to go to prison with cells because I don't want to live in a dorm because one cell is too many. You know what I mean? I didn't want to have 99. All right. So it's kind of like I went there for the wrong reasons, just trying to get out of a worse situation. And even though these great things happen, it's sad, bro. Like I should have had a media center in my neighborhood. I should have been able to go to college for free in my neighborhood. It's sad day in hell when you got to go to prison to get a free college education or to get exposure to how to use a camera or to become a podcaster. That's some backwards thinking. You know what I mean? And so prison is where it happened for me at, but it was going to happen regardless. It just needed a space to happen. And San Quentin's an anomaly. Don't get me wrong. I think there's value to changing all prisons to a model like that because we need healing centers because people are in different states of healing and trauma and don't have career paths and they need certain things. But we shouldn't be providing that in prison. And we damn sure shouldn't be using prisons for mental health hospitals because prisons actually make people worse. So let me tell you 3 things about prison off the top. 3 root causes of crime: trauma. You warehouse in trauma in prison. You see violence all the fucking time in a level 4 prison. Poverty. Prisons keep you broke. You're a slave in prison. You work for 19 cents an hour. They got one of the hardest jobs is the scullery, washing the dishes during chow time for the prison. Sometimes they make you work there for free. You can go there for a non-pay number. And then the third thing is isolation, be excluded from society, losing that connection with your family, your daughter, your sons. These are 3 root causes of crime. And then after you do all that time, another thing that's wrong with prison, even San Quentin, they don't have mechanisms for you to earn a living wage while you're incarcerated. So your parole after doing 20, 30 years in poverty in a desperate situation, and you might have lost all your IDs. You might parole with no ID, no driver's license, don't know where your birth certificate is. You have nothing but $200. You know what I mean? And if you're a lifer, they got to give you transitional housing at least for 6 months. But if you might have did 20 years and not have a life sentence, and you don't necessarily have housing coming, you might just be paroling to live wherever you live, bro. And so they parole people in desperate circumstances. And so the prison is not designed to help people. It's getting better. They're starting to have more services and all that, but it's not enough, and it's not indicative of the whole system. It's an anomaly thing. You know what I mean? These opportunities are rarely available. They're available to a few, and there's few guys like me that have to decide that they want to be better on their own, get better as much as they can on their own, and luck into opportunity to get the actual help.
So what are your thoughts on the changes that the governor's trying to do with San Quentin?
I basically felt like San Quentin was already like that. But taking it to another level, I agree with it. I mean, I think that the Norway model is something we can hold the governor accountable to, or hold the prison system accountable to. Like, yo, we're doing the Norway model, bro, and it got to be this us against them. You know, there's concerns about the budget, like how much they're going to spend on it, because I really feel like we need that media center in my neighborhood. Prison's a default, right? So how much is the building going to help, right? The new building. But overall, like that's a small drop in the bucket compared to how much the prison system spends. And so I think if there's some fiscal responsibility about the spending, like so much like it's not money being taken from somewhere else, like it already comes from a prison budget, you know what I mean? Rather than new money going over there, maybe it's all right. I think that's my biggest concern is just, I need that money invested in my neighborhood, right? But at the same time, it's a conundrum because we need healing centers, because the truth is, if we let everybody go tomorrow, everybody's not ready. You know what I mean? We have to get people ready for success. So when they come home, they don't come back, and they're asset to their family and they're asset to our communities. And having rehabilitation centers help with that. But like I said, I just hate that this is where we building in that when we need it in our neighborhood first.
Tell us the story of how you ended up getting out.
Oh man, look, that was the greatest. I gave up on freedom, and giving up on my freedom allowed me to be a better person, because when I'm doing things, I'm not doing it with the intention of getting out. I'm doing it to make the world better. So it's selfless, and just doing a lot of selfless work, man. And then on top of the selfless work, like Squires, I was in the Squires program, which means we counsel kids that come in from the streets. I'm talking about kids that's in the stuff, like with ankle monitors on, juvenile hall, like, man, these kids going through it and we have a positive effect on them, man. Just in one day of talking, man, it's showing them what the prison's like you don't want to live like this. This is the consequences. But we also tell them our origin stories, and we do it in like 3 minutes. We don't make it about us. We just talk enough to get them to talk, to say, I'm like you. But we tell them our origin stories, but without the real stories, not with the glamour, like, I was the toughest dude in the world and I had the big Benz. Nah, I was ashamed. I mean, this happened to me. And because of that, I acted like this. And then the kids open up and realize, wait a minute, I'm just like you. I'm acting like this because I didn't even realize it. But now that you told me your story, I can talk to you about it, right? And so they tell us stuff they don't tell counselors, they don't tell their parents. It's a really powerful program. But anyway, make a long story short, just doing stuff like that, writing articles in the paper about trying to stop gun violence, being part of restorative justice, just doing everything I can think of, trying to get voting rights for people on parole and people in prison, just doing a history of work. And then at the same time, I'm in media. And so I'm always around people coming in and people took a liking to me and I kept being in documentaries. I got to be part of the Ill Hustle. And so when I made my changes and I'm doing this selfless work, there's the attention on it because there's a lot of good people nobody care about, right? Just nobody knows them. And I was blessed to be in a prison like San Quentin where you constantly expose to people from the street. So when it's time to get support letters, I can get 50, right? So now the governor knows that I'm a good person to give a commutation to, a safe bet, because all these people that know me, that are prominent people in society, can vouch for me. Whereas you might be a good dude in Tracy somewhere and you don't have enough people, only people vouching for is your family. And the government's like, well, that's his family. Maybe they know him the best, but can we trust him the best? And so it's just a lot of luck being in the right place and doing the right things.
So what was the process like?
The process was a slow miracle. And first of all, I'm grateful that the process exists, but it's a long process. It started with, and then you file the application. I filed the application, then I got an interview. Then and when you get the interview, like, yo, you got a good chance of getting it. I mean, somebody actually read your application, right? And then I got the in-bank hearing because in my case, I couldn't just get a commutation from the governor without 2 more reviews because I have a prior felony from New York. Without that prior felony, it would just been an interview and the governor waves his magic wand and I walk out the door. So Jerry Brown was the governor at that time. And so he sent me to the in-bank hearing, and the in-bank hearing was in October, and he was leaving office that December, that January. And so I needed to go to the next step, the California Supreme Court, and get back to the governor's office before he left office. And it didn't. It went in the California Supreme Court, did not come out. Jerry Brown left office on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve or whatever. He announced a bunch of commutations. I listened carefully. My name wasn't in them. He left office and I was like, I missed it. I missed it. I missed it. I missed it. But thank God my boys got out. Good dudes, man. They're all out here doing great today. And so I was like, damn. But then the new governor came. He's like, yo, they got a new process. Just file a form and they'll reanimate your old commutation. I'm like, yes. I'm gonna just file this form. And I ain't hear nothing for like a year. And then when the year was up, I was like, yo, I did the other steps. Maybe it's just, you can just, nah. I had to do the in-bank hearing all over again, so I had to rally the troops. The first time 50 people showed up. This time about the same amount, 50 people showed up online or whatever for the in-bank hearing. It went well. Then I had to wait for it to go to the California Supreme Court. That finally happened. The governor was still in office. Went back to his desk. I forgot the date, but I think it was in January. They called me and said I had a commutation. My sister was being commuted to life with possibility of parole with immediate consideration by the parole board for a release date. And so I had to wait to see the parole board, which took about 6-7 months. And I got to see them. And when I saw them, they granted me parole on the first try, but I still had to wait 5 months to actually walk out the door. So for me, it was a long process, but I'm home 33 years early, so it's hard to complain about.
So what was it like walking out?
Like running the New York City Marathon, man. Like the love you experience when a whole city come out to cheer for you was the love I experienced walking out that door. There were about 50 people out there, cameras, friends, everything. And there were some of them were volunteers that I worked with in the prison for years, but could not touch. There's like this force field, held by rules that we just can't hug. And so I was able to hug everybody. I hugged 50 people literally that day within 10 minutes of walking out the prison system. And so it just felt like love, man. Just never felt so much support before.
And
And
what was
the
your
only
first meal?
steak and French toast. I've been dreaming about steak, and my mama used to always make French toast for me, and she's really good at it. And I just want a decent steak, man. Like they give us these little Salisbury steaks in prison that were just a travesty of justice. So I wanted real food. I wanted a real steak.
So what have you been doing since you got out?
My God, your podcast is not long enough for that answer. Sheesh. A lot, man. Like for instance, I am a producer with the Hustle podcast Monday and Tuesday. But my primary job and position in life is Empowerment Ivy. I'm an executive director. Empowerment Ivy is this incredible program that helps creative people in prison reach major platforms and get paid prevailing wages. So what that looks like is we facilitate you getting published in the New York Times by connecting with a volunteer who's a writer themselves, and we'll do the editing and the emailing to submittable or whatever it takes, or the pitching to a publisher to get you in, and then to help facilitate the invoice process so you get paid. And we have about 30 writers in the program, and they're award-winning. We hit the New York Times 3 times, Rolling Stone, every major, Washington Post, LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, Miami Herald, Boston Globe. I was in the Boston Globe personally, like every major paper in every major city down there. We're killing it. We're killing it. And we're doing the same for artists. Got artists in MoMA, just it's killing it, killing it. We got Berkeley Arts Center coming up in July. And now we're doing the same thing with films. I was able to make a couple of films while I was incarcerated. I parole with them. Friendly Signs is the latest one I'm pushing really hard. We just came back from the Atlanta Film Festival. Next, we're going to Brave Makers right here in California. And so now I'm offering that same opportunity to other incarcerated people by helping them co-direct their films. And so I'm working on 2 right now. Silent Treatment, which was one I was working on at San Quentin, but I paroled without finishing it. I'm working with the guys inside to finish it. I'm also the director and co-director and co-founder of the San Quentin Film Festival. We're having the first film festival at a state prison, October 10th. And we got all kinds of celebrity judges, from Mary Louise Parker to who name it, man. Taylor Hackworth, all kinds of people. It's just an amazing all-star list of judges, like 20 of them, just amazing, amazing people that are titans in Hollywood, showrunners, directors, writers, actors, actresses. This festival is going to be better than the one I just came from in Atlanta. The better judges, better opportunities for distribution, better opportunities for everything. So that, and then somewhere along the line, I'm still a writer, even though I only wrote twice since I've been home, but I'm still working on my books and still trying to squeeze my writing career in there somewhere. And I'm still doing my Squires. I'm not doing through the Squires program at San Quentin, but I still visit juvenile halls. I visit high schools and still try to do my counselor mentor type thing. And I have a friend putting the Brownsville Boxing Academy in Brownsville, Brooklyn, where I grew up. And this boxing gym is going to teach kids all the careers in boxing besides just boxing: refereeing, trainer, cutman, commentator, all this stuff. And man, my heart, we're putting the media center in there. And so I'm also semi-involved with that. I don't have much time in the day, but I'm trying to support that from a distance as best as I can. And there's probably some stuff I'm forgetting, but I just do a lot in one day.
So when you talk to young people, what do you tell them?
I tell them, I start with my story. I tell them, like, you know, because really it's not about what you tell young people. Almost everybody knows up from down and left from right. Their feelings are superseding their emotions. And their feelings, they don't even understand. So there's a book called The Body Keeps Score, and it talks about trauma can create an unconscious compulsion for you to be violent. You know what I mean? Unconscious, and you can't control it. You're not conscious of why. And so, but recognizing that trauma will help you heal and stop conducting violence. And so the first thing I do is I tell them my story. And like I said, the real story, the shame that had me running when my little brother got shot. The shame that made me try to reproduce that situation so I could be the victor. I can show them not a punk, right, to myself, because I never forgave myself and all that. And by just letting them know I'm one of you, I'm not going to judge you, I've been doing the same crazy stuff, it gets them to open up and talk. You know what I mean? And that's where the healing can begin. And so it's not about what I tell them. I got all kinds of great voice, like keep chasing today, you're going to miss tomorrow. You know what I mean? Don't let a temporary solution give you a long-term problem. All kinds of stuff, but that's not what works. What works is when you get them to open up and you find out what's really going on in their life. And if you're going to provide resources or help to help with those circumstances, or at least be an ear to help them talk about it and cope with it.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Thanks so much for joining us.
All good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
We've been talking with New York from Ear Hustle. He was paroled back in 2023, so last year. His actual name is Rahsaan Thomas. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.
Thank you to George Powell and Norman Mousequake Barrett for the use of our opening, Everyday Injustice. You can see more of George's music at www.justiceforgeorgepowell.com.